So I'm going to just preface this episode by saying the movie that we're covering deals a lot with mental illness, depression, anxiety, and suicide. So if that's something that you're sensitive to and you're going to potentially be put into a tough situation by listening to this episode, then go ahead and skip it, and feel free to join us next week for another episode that hopefully won't deal with such intense topics.
Yeah.
All right, and we're live. Welcome back, Leslie.
Hello.
Haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. I mean, I have.
Yeah. You
I
see
haven't-
me every day.
I haven't gotten a break from you.
Yeah. You don't get to get a break from me.
Well,
Is
I
that why you
guess-
slept late today?
and that's why I was up so late last night without you. But yeah, welcome back, listeners. This is Weeb Reviews episode 5. This is a podcast about anime reviews, and this is the 5th episode, so I hope that you knew that by now. So, if not, you're kind of jumping in the deep end here.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Can listen to each episode on its own.
Yeah, it's not a series.
Unless you want to just chronicle a very slow descent into madness, then you can kind of listen to each one sequentially. But you don't have to.
Anyway,
Leslie,
what's up?
what did we review this week?
We reviewed A Silent Voice. Yes? I said that right, yes?
Yes, A Silent Voice.
Okay.
And what is a silent voice?
Silent-
Oh, spoiler alert, by the way. Before before we get too far into it.
Yes.
Spoiler alert. This will be riddled with spoilers. I feel like this might be one that it would be best to go in
It'd be best to
fresh.
watch it.
It would be best to go in fresh when you watch it. There are some things. It's not to say it'll be ruined if you listen to this and then watch it, or ruined on a second watch. I don't think any of the things we reviewed can be ruined.
No.
But I think this is one that definitely benefits from going in with fresh expectations.
Yeah.
So
And it's only like a 2-hour
yeah, it's 2
movie.
hours
It's
long.
not like a whole series you have to sit down and
You can just bang it
trudge
out in
through.
one sitting. It's nice and easy.
I wouldn't say easy.
it's a very short time commitment.
Yes.
So it's, you can go, you can watch it, you can feel how you feel about it, and then come back and listen to what we have to say about it. So with that out of the way, what is A Silent Voice?
It is a movie focused around, I would say, specifically 2 main characters.
Yep.
One being a deaf girl and the other being her middle school bully.
Yes.
It follows their individual and shared journeys.
Follows their wacky escapades.
Wacky is a little lighthearted for this situation, I think.
Fair enough. So let's really quick jump into who the characters are,
Okay.
so that people can get an idea for what we're talking about when we're talking about this later. So I'll start us off with our protagonist, who is Shia Ishida. He was quite a bad bully in 6th grade, in middle school. He grew up to be an extremely depressed and anxious person who really kind of blames himself for all of the bad things that have happened to him and the people around him. And he feels like he never really changed from the person he was in middle school, and as a result, he doesn't really deserve forgiveness by, forgiveness in the form of others forgiving him or even from himself. And he never really moved past his previous mistakes. But besides that, his later incarnation tries to be kind and selfless and caring in order to try to make amends for his past transgressions.
Mm-hmm. And then there's Shoko Nishimiya, who is the deaf girl. And her whole character is based around the fact that she hates herself and feels like she's inconveniencing and burdening everyone around her, including her own family. But despite this, she craves acceptance from her classmates.
Yeah.
And
not just her classmates, from everybody.
Well,
really.
Yeah, from everybody, but she doesn't really have to go after acceptance from her family. Her family accepts her pretty wholeheartedly. She just doesn't feel like she deserves it. It's one of those vicious circles.
Yeah. This is true. Anything else you wanted to add about her?
No.
Okay. Next we have Nagatsuka, who is kind of a loner who sits behind Ishida in class in high school. He's kind of a social outcast. So when he winds up gaining Ishida as a friend, he winds up being a very solid and loyal friend to him. He'll do almost anything for somebody who's earned that friendship. And he's very overprotective of his status as Ishida's best friend, in a kind of a cute, silly way.
Yeah.
But next up
is Yuzuru Nishimiya, who is Shoko's younger sister. When we first meet Shoko, when we first meet Yuzuru, she looks like a boy. We think she's a boy.
Yes, indeed.
She dresses in mostly boys' athletic and leisure clothing.
Yeah.
No idea why. It's never addressed. The only thing that sort of tips you off when you first see her is her eyes are animated like the rest of the girls in the series,
yeah.
But nothing else about her says girl.
Yeah. She's very androgynous looking.
Yes. She's very protective and feels like she's very responsible for Shoko's mental health. And she's equally as loyal as Nagatsuka.
Yeah. And she's interesting too because she bears this weight and this burden as somebody who's, she can't have been much older than they were in middle school.
Yeah, no, I think she is in 6th grade.
And she also doesn't go to school, which is another interesting thing.
Right. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, she just kind of dropped out. I don't know.
I don't know how that got past her mother.
Yeah.
But
which we'll discuss her mother when we're talking about the series as a whole. Next up, we have Ueno, who is Ishida's old friend from middle school. She never really moved on from middle school. She kind of never really moved past it. And she's still very angry as a person. She's very angry over the events that occurred in 6th grade.
She's just a bitch.
And she's still very much a bully in a lot of ways, as she was back then.
To me, she's an irredeemable bitch. I can't like her in any capacity.
Which is understandable.
They try to redeem her later on.
More or less.
But it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me.
I later on we'll talk, and I have a little bit of an argument to be made there. But
it's gonna have to be a damn good one.
Yeah. Moving on.
Oh right, my turn. Next we have Kawaii, which is a fitting name for her. She's the kind of like the pretty face character. She's the cute blonde, wears her hair in twin braids. She's very, very, has a very, like, pleasant appearance. She's an old classmate from when they were in middle school. She ends up going to the same high school as Ishida. And she went along with a lot of the jokes back then, but always kind of denied participating when push came to shove.
Yeah.
With like the teachers, and even to Shoko herself, she was very much in denial of her participation.
Yeah, she was very she was perfectly happy to play along, with the jokes.
Yeah.
But then when
blame started being
there was
assigned,
real consequences for it, she kind of
took this I would never.
Yeah, was more than happy to point the finger at everybody except herself. So. Yeah. And then lastly, we have Sahara, who is the only person in middle school who was really nice to Shoko. She was the only one who kind of enthusiastically offered to learn sign language.
She's really gay. Yeah. You can tell by looking at her. She's a huge fucking lesbian.
Yeah.
You better not edit that out. I'll kill you.
Edit you out.
I don't care.
She wound up actually leaving the school before the bullying towards Shoko got really intense. And she later on in life still has issues with kind of running from conflict instead of facing it. And she's very caring, but also very fragile. So, those are the real mainstay figures that are going to be very relevant throughout the series. You have some other kind of side characters that pop up here and there.
Maria, who is Ishida's niece.
Yes.
She's very cute.
Yes, she is.
She's very small and cute. She's like 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah. And then you have Ishida's mother and you have Shoko's mother, who both show up fairly consistently.
Yeah.
But they didn't really show up enough that I felt it was necessary to put them in the character descriptions. So.
There's one other that Kawai's high school boyfriend shows up and is fairly pivotal later on in the movie.
Yeah.
He's just kind of your standard anime pretty boy.
Yeah.
But he's important. He represents the friend maid versus the friend, like...
Yeah, he represents kind of like the new friend.
Yeah, the kind of like proof that Ishida can make friends.
Well, I would say Nishimiya is actually... Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
Do you mean Nagatsuka?
Nagatsuka, yeah.
Well, yeah, but Nagatsuka kind of, like, forces his way into friendship a little bit. He is a friend made, but he was a very easy friend to make.
That's fair.
I don't even remember Kawai's boyfriend's name. It started with an M. I'm forgetting it.
Yeah, he only showed up a few times, and it was never, like... He never had, like, a super huge role.
Your notes somewhere. His name isn't really important anyway. It's really his character.
Yeah.
So.
So let's now discuss kind of the overall impressions regarding the plot, tone, characters, setting, style, sound, etc. So, as far as the plot goes, this movie is purely a character drama.
It's
at its core.
It's very human.
It very much is, and the plot is entirely driven by the characters, by their actions, by their decisions, things like that. Which can be a bit frustrating at times, because you'll see things be like, oh man, things like look like they're gonna work out finally, and then one of these very organic, very believable characters will wind up doing something stupid or selfish or something along those lines.
Contrived something.
Yeah, and it'll wind up throwing the plot completely off and sort of causing these ripple effects that impact everybody. And it's like, damn it, no, why'd you have to do that? It's like, it feels, there was a few times while I was watching it, I was like, that seems like contrived that would happen. Like, seems like they were just kind of like, they threw in this drama for no reason. But then when I'd think about it, I'd be like,
no, that's just how high school is, man.
No, that's just kind of how people are, It's like, so there was a few times where I took a second and was like, wait, that doesn't, and then when I thought about it, I was like, no, you know what, like, that kind of does make perfect sense how that would happen. It just kind of seemed like it didn't because I'm not in high school anymore.
Yeah.
So it's...
I remember pretty well the friend circle drama that happened in high school.
I didn't have friends in high school.
So. Well, I didn't want to say it, but since you did. As someone who had friends in high school, this is a pretty accurate representation.
Yeah. So, it's...
They're very compelling characters. They're
Yes.
believable, compelling, and like, even if for a moment you don't necessarily believe an action that happened, as soon as you take a second and think about their mental state in that given moment, it makes perfect sense.
It really does. They this is a Kyoto Animation film, and for those of you who aren't aware, Kyoto does some really fucking outstanding work. They did Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, which we reviewed a couple weeks back.
They did Free Eternal Summer,
Yep.
all of those, which I watched back in the day. Writing maybe could use some work, but the animation was always top notch.
Yeah.
And back in the day, I loved the writing on Free. I don't think I'd like it as much now, but that's on being a dramatic high schooler.
Yep. They also did Violet Evergarden, which was excellent.
Too slow for me, but it looked really pretty.
Yeah. I'll definitely review that at some point. And that's also the studio that a few years back, I think I mentioned this in the Kobayashi episode, but it's also the studio that a few years back had that really, really horrible arson attack that actually wound up killing, I think, 35 people.
Something like that.
And
several of them being animators.
Yeah, a number of them being animators, and also destroyed a ton of work. But they, I believe this managed to come out, this came out in 2016. So
Yes.
This came out, I think, right before that happened. Do you have anything else you wanted to say about the plot?
I mean, not really. You touched on everything in your notes, and it's pretty comprehensive.
Fair enough.
I mean, if it was like a 13 episode series, I probably would with how much you have written, but it's just a 2-hour movie. So it's really, the plot is pretty concise and contained.
Yeah, I'll also add though, it's very dense.
Yes, it's
the
dense
film is,
but contained.
The film is extremely information dense. And I'll even say, to touch on that, this was one of the hardest things we've watched for me to take notes on. Because there was times, I mean, you and I sat and watched it together, and you remember there was times where, we'd watch for 15 straight minutes, and I'd just have my tablet next to me. And then I'd wind up having to pause it just so I could record everything that happened in the last 15 minutes, because I was like,
yeah,
God, I couldn't peel my eyes away from the screen.
Yeah.
There was so much going on.
Yeah.
And it was just one thing after another, after another, after another, and it was the hits just kept coming. So there's that, and actually the one thing, and I wasn't sure if this belonged in plot or not, but I guess I'll mention it in here. The plot, there was a few sequences where I I actually thought they were like dream sequences. There were some dream sequences in it, but like there was a few sequences that weren't dream sequences that I thought were. So I initially didn't write anything down. And then I was kind of like, oh shit, no, this is real. And I was like, I need to write this down. This is important. So there was those sequences where I was like, was watching it. I was like, man, this is a long dream sequence. And I was like, this is a realistic dream sequence. Oh shit, this is real. Fuck. I need to write this down. So that did happen, I think, twice.
I don't know if I ever didn't think it was a real scene.
One of them was when it was right after kind of he broke up the friend group, and you know, he had that meltdown on the bridge, and it showed that kind of like montage of them, like, you know, silly times at the movies, silly times in a diner, silly times doing, and it was kind of like, based on the way it was framed, it seemed like it was going on inside Ishida's imagination to me. Maybe that was just my interpretation of it, but yeah, it just, and we'll talk about that, the scene that led into that, because that's an extremely important scene. But yeah, that just based on the way that was framed and based on the narration that was going on over it, it struck me as an an imaginary thing going on inside his head, not actually happening in the real world. It wasn't until it was like, we're baking a cake for your mom, and like that scene lasted for like 20 minutes, and I was like, oh, this is like this isn't a dream anymore.
Okay, I think I couldn't place what scene you were talking about until you said that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I didn't have any
that interpretation from it.
issues with that scene at all.
So it was just me then.
Yeah.
I'm just stupid.
Sometimes.
Okay. So let's touch on the tone. What were your thoughts on like the tone of the film? Like, how do you think that worked with the characters and the plot? And do you think it was like consistent?
I think it had a good balance between like serious and like comic relief, kind of. Like there was a lot of, I would say that it averaged out to a consistent tone.
Yeah.
But there were like, obviously
There were highs and lows.
There was highs and lows, and like they worked with each other. It wasn't, you have here that it was consistent throughout. I don't think it was consistent necessarily, but it was cohesive.
I think the tone stayed within 2 standard deviations of the mean, which is to say it was consistent throughout. You should see your face right now.
I don't like you.
I'm very technical with my analysis.
Yeah,
No.
okay, Mr. Film Student.
No, but no, I mean, I do think it was consistent throughout, because it never got, it dealt with some really dark things at times, but it handled them, they weren't made hyper dramatic, as far as like, look how dark and edgy we can be. It was
Well,
like,
no, it was never like,
it was handled the same as the light scenes were. It was like, this is what's happening, and these are these real characters going through this. You know, and that's not to say they didn't emphasize a lot of those dark scenes. You know, specifically the scene in Shoko's apartment after the fireworks, or during the fireworks. It's not to say it didn't emphasize the fact that fucked up shit was happening, but even with like the comedy, like the comedic scenes also never got so insanely comedic and wacky and zany. It stayed consistent with the way it was written, in my opinion. It stayed like, you never had like, you know, we just reviewed Demon Slayer, Patrick and myself, and you watched some of that as well. It never got as wacky and zany as the comedic scenes in that,
Right.
for instance.
I
Despite
suppose.
being overall a much lighter in tone film, it could have probably gotten away with being a little bit more wacky, zany.
Mm.
But I think, despite the fact that it could have gotten away with it, it maintained a good tone. It reminded me almost of like Kobayashi, but take it down like four notches.
I guess.
You know. So I do think it stayed. I think it stayed consistent. It was. I basically just have written down here for tone drama, 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 and I think that's totally accurate. It was a drama through and through. It was not a comedy. It was not, an action film or anything like that. It was a drama, and it lived up to that. It was true to that, in my opinion. So, do you want to? Fair enough. Cool.
I said what I wanted to say.
Fair enough. Characters. How do you feel about how the characters were written, how they came across,
Kinda
just
think-
as a whole?
I kind of think we already talked about that, more or less. They're believable human characters. Like that's the whole plot, is the characters. So
Yeah.
when we spoke about the plot, we spoke about the characters and how believable their interactions were.
That's true.
So there's really not much for me to add about the characters. They're
I'll just read my note that says I love them,
okay.
because I do.
Okay.
I
Cool.
actually really did get very attached to the characters.
Well, yeah. I
as it went
mean,
on.
it's
Yeah,
a compelling. It's very compelling writing.
Yeah, it is. You definitely have a point that it's extremely compelling, and the characters, you feel, despite it only being 2 hours long, you really feel like you get to know them and you get attached to them. Even the characters that you don't necessarily like, I found myself trying to understand them
I guess.
and trying to be like,
I guess. Yeah.
I
I mean,
don't want to hate you.
anytime Ueno was on screen, I was like, "Why are you like this?
Yeah, it's
just
like,
be better.
just be
better. Just
move
be a
past what
better
happened,
person.
you
Stop
know?
being such a useless, hopeless bitch."
Yeah, and it was like,
Like,
I wanted to understand
cut
her
it
because
out.
I didn't want to hate her. I wanted to like her. I wanted her to be a redeemable character. And, whether that happened or not, you and I, I'm sure, are going to debate later. But, there's that. As far as the setting, it was modern day Japan. There's not really much to add there.
No, there wasn't any like supernatural,
Yeah.
like outside forces or anything like that. It was just people living in Japan.
So let's address the style. It was, the first note I have written down, it was Kyoto. It was.
Yeah.
It looked like Kyoto animation. The eyes were a pretty distinct
Mm-hmm.
tell of that. They do such a good job making their eyes.
I just realized Ishida's eyes looked like Kobayashi's
Did they?
a little bit. They were the same, like, quote unquote dead fish
yeah,
eyes.
yeah, dead fish eyes. Yeah, that's true. That's
They were
definitely
different
true.
shape, obviously, but like everything was just drawn a little bit more seriously in this than
Yes,
Kobayashi.
yes.
Kobayashi, everything was round. This one, things had sharp edges.
Yeah, everything was. Yeah, I think that's true. I compared it to Kobayashi, but I'll address it like you had said about the art styles of the two. The art doesn't look the same
No.
in the two, but they both have very appropriate art styles for their tone.
Yes, and you can see the Kyoto style
You can
shining
see it
through.
in kind of the DNA, yeah. So it's beautiful. I mean,
Yes.
it's stunning. I found it very interesting how much of it was done like with a simulated like handheld shaky cam effect on it. Like it was
I don't
different.
think I noticed it.
It's not. I did because cinematography.
Fucking film student.
Fuck off. But it was like they went out of their way to give it a very like handheld, hand like hand shot feel in a lot of scenes, and that's not something you see a whole lot in anime, because well, it's fucking drawings. You don't have to have a cameraman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's,
Yeah, it almost it seems like I said, I didn't notice it, but like with you pointing it out, I can see why they would do it. It's
Yeah.
kind of like they wanted it to almost be like shot from the perspective of either someone within their circles or another student.
well,
In a lot of
no.
in a lot of the scenes that you're talking about with the shaky cam, not necessarily a shaky cam, but like the like handheld look of it, it looks, because I remember like ones, not necessarily the shaky cam ones, but ones that looked like, like panning shots that looked like they were from a perspective, kind of. It looked like it could have been like either a passerby or like someone that they knew, like just taking a video and catching that little glimpse of something.
I can sort of. I think I know what you're talking about, and that is different from what I'm describing.
Okay.
But
It was filmed from a very organic perspective.
yeah,
Is what I'm trying to get at, I think.
it was. Yeah, you didn't have like a lot of like wild camera angles and things
No.
like that. Like you can have that in anime. You can get away with it.
Yeah.
And there was a few times when it was kind of POV.
Yeah.
I
I mean, there's one specific instance where it was intentionally POV,
yeah.
but that's different altogether.
So it has that, but it's they paid a lot of attention to the cinematography in this, and that's impressive to me. It almost looked like they were filming it like you could do this film live action.
Yeah, shot for shot.
You could shot for shot recreate this live action, and it wouldn't look that weird.
No.
I mean, it would have those weird, gross things called humans in it instead of anime characters, but
Okay.
You could film this. You could adapt this into a live action feature film. Don't know why you would, but you could, and it would look basically the same.
Yeah.
And it felt like that's what they were kind of going for. Like they this is gonna sound stupid, but like it's like they didn't want this to feel like an anime. They wanted this to feel like a film, and it did. And that's not to kind of disparage anime, but like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was being clear there and not just talking nonsense. But
Well, you always talk nonsense. But
yeah, well,
this time it didn't seem like it.
okay.
That's what you're worried about.
As far as the style, I really liked how, and they didn't do this with very many things, but later on when Ishida is going through his mental illnesses regarding like his really bad anxiety and his depression and things like that, he can't look people in the face, and they did a great job when he's like at school and things like that, showing that by having these like cartoonish X's on everyone's faces. And then when he would meet somebody that he would be able to look in the face, that he would like start to get to know a little bit, essentially when he was comfortable enough with a person to be able to look them in the face, the X would like fall off, like it was like a piece of paper, and it would like fall off and land on the ground. And whenever there was a character that he suddenly couldn't look in the face again, like Ueno,
several times.
Yeah, a number of times when she
Backstabbing
basically
bitch.
betrayed his trust. The exes would like fly back on, like the ex would like fly back onto her face, and I think that was so cool the way it was done, and I like that it wasn't overused either. It was used when he was at school, and sometimes when he was hanging out with like the friend group, but like when he was like at home with his family, and like when he
Or,
was
like,
out
in
just
public.
randomly in public on the street, that wasn't the case. Like they didn't have just thousands of little
Yeah.
cartoonish X's in every single shot of the film.
It was only.
It was really only at school.
Only where his public perception would matter.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of accurate.
Like where people actually care about that sort of thing. Whereas like in public where you're passing by thousands of people who you're never going to see again, they don't fucking care what you did in middle school.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
your high school classmates, upperclassmen, whatever it may be, hear things, hear rumors, they know things, and to you, their perception of you matters.
That's true. That's a good way to put it. And I had this noted under style, but I mentioned it earlier about sometimes not being able to differentiate between the dream sequences and the real ones. Oftentimes, I suppose the dream sequences were animated differently. They had more kind of like a white vignetting on them.
I don't really remember that many dream sequences.
There was a couple. There was when he was in the hospital, and he was having the dream about Shoko.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And
yeah.
there was, I think, one or two
Well,
others.
it was Shoko's matching dream.
Yes.
Of him. Of him? Of something. She was having a matching dream, weirdly. At the same time. They were dreaming at the same time.
Yes, and that's why
of
she
each
went
other.
That's why she went to the bridge.
And that's why
then
she-
he
and
met her
he-
at the bridge.
Broke out of the hospital.
Just fucking yeeted himself out of the hospital. He's like, I'm out. Like, I'm
done-
not waiting
I'm
for the
done
fucking
here.
nurses to disconnect this shit from me. Which I don't know if you can do that, but maybe in Japan you can. That's not the first time I've seen that in an anime, so maybe
Well, it's not
you
the
can.
first time I've seen that in any show. I've seen it a bunch of times in American television as well.
Maybe I just haven't been to a hospital very much. So as far as the opening song, or the not the opening song, as far as the sound goes for the series, for the film, I really liked that, like, the song that plays over kind of the opening montage. It's not like the first few scenes, it's the first scenes that show him in like middle school, because the first few scenes are him trying to throw himself off a bridge.
Yeah.
But immediately after that, when he recalls
Yeah, when
the
he's
events that
having
led to that.
a pleasant flashback to his middle school days.
Yes. The song that plays over the montage of him in 6th grade with his buddies is My Generation by The Who. And it was great. It fits so well. It just worked so, and I was like, oh hell yeah. I was like, this is a jam, man. Like, I can get behind this. And they had another I don't remember what the other song was, but there was the other montage of him bullying Shoko, and that had like a pretty good jam over it too. Until he went too far and hurt her, and then it quickly stopped playing the song.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was very interesting. I don't know of, off the top of my head, I can't think of any other anime that have used kind of like classic rock as like a song in their...
Classic alternative
Yeah.
rock from the 60s in America.
Yeah. I mean, it worked. It worked really well. It was excellent. Other than that, I mean, sound design was just really well done. I didn't really take any notes specifically about that, but like, the sound design was just really well done. They there was the scene where they were at the amusement park, and like they're on the roller coaster, and they start going up, and you hear the like clink 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 as they're like climbing up and stuff, and I'm like, I felt like there. I was like, oh, I was getting anxious as they were getting towards the top. I was like, all right, it's not real. I'm not on it.
Hey, do you not like roller coasters?
No, I do like roller coasters, but I get anxious when I'm on them anyway. It's kind of like it was like exactly what Sahara said. She's like, oh, where is it? It was like, yeah. I'll wait until after the ride, I'll wait until after I ride it to decide if it's scary or not. But it's still scary. And there was kind of a lot of like metaphors with that whole roller coaster scene.
Oh yeah.
God, it was so fucking well done. It was so good. I was just gonna say that again. The film was so good. Watch it.
It was very good.
Go watch it right now. I don't care if you've not seen it before and you're like, oh, I'll just listen to this and then just stop. No, pause this right now and go watch it. It's on Netflix. It's excellent. Go fucking watch it. I mean, that's all the notes I have for an overview. Let's talk what happens in the film.
Okay.
Start us off. Where do you want to start us off with kind of some main points from the film, some main highlights that you want to touch on? We don't have to necessarily run through each event in the plot sequentially.
Right.
But, like, let's talk about some important things.
I mean, I guess, like, when you first, like, when you sit down to watch the movie, you're thrown into it kind of, like, in the middle of his crisis.
Yeah. It's as he's
literally getting his affairs in order.
Yeah.
He's going to kill himself.
Yeah.
He's going to bike to the bridge and jump off of it.
Yes.
That's where he's at. He repays his mother all the money that he owes her. We don't know why she owes her money
yet
to start with. And then he
rips off half of his calendar.
Yeah.
You know.
I still don't know the significance of that day. I don't. April 15th, I think was his.
I don't know if it was
final day.
Specific. I don't know if there was a specific reason why it was that day. It might have been just kind of a choice, like, that's it. This day coming up, this gives me enough time to get the money I need to quit my job, to sell my things, and that'll be my last day. It might have just been an arbitrary day. I could be mistaken. For anybody who's seen the film and, like, knows,
yeah,
feel free to correct us.
I tend to not. I have no concept of time in real life, let alone in movies and shows. I have no idea.
I don't remember them making any specific references to any other dates throughout the film. So I'm inclined to think that it might have been arbitrary.
It might have been. But yeah, I mean, you don't know why he's doing all of this. You just... And then when he gets to the bridge... He gets snapped out of it by some kids playing with fireworks.
Yes.
Which triggers a flashback.
Which triggers him, he sees them playing, and he recalls his time fucking around as a kid with his friends.
That's what I just said.
And that winds up leading into basically the first, like, third of the film, or quarter of the film.
Yeah.
Is just is basically just sixth grade.
Yeah.
Like, from right before Shoko gets to the school, transfers into the school, until, like, right after she leaves.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows the progression of things, what's considered normal before she arrives, and how that changes after she gets there, and then even after she leaves.
Yeah.
And you start to you just start to understand what Ueno references later on about how, like, everything was fine before she came along. Like, I wish she had just, I wish she had never transferred into school. I wish we'd never met her because everything was great until we met her. And
Yeah, I would
that's
never have to evaluate my actions and life choices if she never showed up.
sort of, but I mean, it's I, and I guess this is as good a time to address it as any. I sort of got her. As much as I, of all people,
Yeah.
should not probably be able to sympathize with her, I could because I I could kind of see her being like, you know, we were all friends, we had a good thing going, we, you know, we didn't have to care about stupid school or any of this stuff. Like, you know, you were popular in class, I was popular in class, you know, we had our shit together, in her opinion.
Yeah.
Until she came along and she ruined it, because then all of a sudden, like, you know, you know, because of all the bullying, you became a social outcast, which wasn't fair, and this and that, and blah blah blah. And it's like, it made me understand where she was coming from, and I even kind of, despite how angry the scene was where she confronted Shoko on the Ferris wheel,
Mm-hmm.
I almost couldn't be mad at her for that scene. I was angry about it, but I almost didn't blame her, because she was even kind of like, I hate you, you hate me, let's be civil about it. And I think that was a mature way to be very immature.
Yeah.
You
No.
know, it's like we don't have to like each other. It's immature in the sense that she was like, I'm refusing to like you, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But it was mature in the sense that it's like, let's not sabotage each other. Let's just, like,
See, I have
be civil when we're around each other.
I have no sympathy towards her whatsoever,
Why is
and
that?
I will tell you why. That is because she did not want to put in any effort. Ever. With anybody. She tried later on to put in some effort with Shoya, with Ishida, but she never wanted to, like, she wrote in Shoko's notebook because that's how she asked. But as soon as the idea of learning sign language came up, she was like, I don't want to put in extra effort. That's not my fucking problem.
Well,
It's not my fault she can't hear. I shouldn't have to do any extra work because of it.
I disagree with you a little bit, because she was the first person to actually try to help Shoko when Shoko showed up in class. She was, because here's the thing, fuck the school administration a little bit, because the school administration, when Shoko first transferred in, they didn't seem to, like, for the most part, put any effort into helping Shoko adapt as somebody who couldn't fucking hear. You saw all the lectures were all verbal lectures. They weren't written. So Shoko didn't know what the fuck was going on. And that's why Ueno was the one sitting there trying to be like, here, let me help write down what's going on for you so you have an idea. And then that's why, you know, you saw, you know, Ueno eventually was like, I didn't get to pay attention to at all to what was going on in class. I didn't take any notes because I was too busy helping her. And some of her friends were like, oh, you can borrow my notes, you can borrow my notes. And you saw this resentment building up. It wasn't, she didn't start off resenting Shoko. It wasn't until a little ways in, and then she kind of started, that resentment turned into her trash talking behind her back and other things. And then when they were like, oh, we're gonna all learn sign language, she's like, fuck that. Why? And the administration's like, well, because it's easier for her to use sign language than to write in the notebook. And she's like, well, it's easier for me to write in the notebook, so I don't care. And you saw it wasn't just like that came out of nowhere. She'd already kind of been building this resentment because it's like, you're changing things. Things were fine. I was doing fine. And then I was trying to be a nice person and help you. And what do I get out of it? Now I've got to put in more effort for you. I'm done putting in effort for you. That's what I got from that.
I guess.
And that's not to say that's not still a selfish thing, because it is. It's still an impatient, selfish thing. And then to allow that resentment to turn into full-on, really kind of severe bullying is not cool, She went out of her way to ostracize Shoko after that, after expressing to Shoko, like, no, I'll help you, I'll be your friend, and then kind of suddenly changing her mind and going, you know what, no, fuck you. And Shoko just wanted to be accepted.
Yeah.
She already felt like an inconvenience. She already felt like a burden. And then for Ueno to be like, you're a fucking burden, leave me alone, only contributed to her lack of self-worth.
Yeah.
And that's fucked. But again, I could sympathize.
I'm not saying that it's not a believable course of action.
Yeah. I'm
just saying I would under no circumstances have that mindset and cannot sympathize whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just because I'm an extremely strong empath when it comes to a lot of things, and I was kind of like, I could see this. Yeah, I can see this being the way it is. I can see this transpiring.
Well, yeah, no, I can
see this resentment building up, and I can sympathize with, like, I understand how she feels. I haven't been there. I couldn't ever do that to somebody personally, not anymore. Maybe in middle school I could have, but I couldn't see myself doing this. But that doesn't mean I can't understand where she's coming from, and I can't go, I get this. I think you're handling it wrong, but, like, I can't say that this is entirely your fault, I think is what it boiled down to with Ueno, for me. And then at the end, you saw I think it was a huge step for her. At the very end of the film, you saw that basically every other character in the film, for the most part, had, like, learned sign language at this point. Not every single one, but, like, most of the characters in, like, the big friend group had, like, started to learn sign language, or was, like, already on their way to being fairly fluent in sign language. Ueno was the one who refused to learn. And right at the very end, when Ishida gets out of the hospital and they're kind of coming together again, the group, because Shoko felt like she was the cause and she destroyed the friend group. So she, when she didn't think Ishida was going to survive, she said, I want to repair what I've broken. I want to repair what I've destroyed. And she tried to bring everybody back together. And then when he came out of the hospital because he was okay, they kind of celebrated a little bit. And Ueno shows up and kind of is trying to call Shoko a moron. And she signs moron to her. And everybody looks at her like, wait, you learned sign? She's like, shut up, fuck you. And she, like, walks away. And it was like...
It was mostly funny because Shoko then corrected her.
Yeah, Shoko corrected her because she signed it incorrectly.
Like, just barely, just very vaguely incorrectly.
Yeah, it was her hand motions were off by, like, a little bit. And she was, like, showing her the proper way to sign it. And she's like, well, fuck you, leave me alone. And it was I did chuckle. I did get amusement out of that scene, and like I
Oh
do
yeah, I
think that
was
was a
amused by
big.
it,
I
but
do think that was like, for a character like her, I think that was the first step to her moving past what happened. And I want to. This is stupid because they're fictionalized characters, but I wanted to support her trying to get past that rather than continue to hold her past actions against her, because that was the whole metaphor of the film, moving past your past mistakes.
I just felt like it was too little too late, personally. But that's me, and
Yeah.
I hold grudges.
I can't.
I know.
I can't. And for me, it was like, I'm one of these people that like, oh, the film doesn't end after, like, the characters still are alive after the credits roll, and it was like, it didn't feel like too late because like there was still the whole rest of their lives for
Yeah,
her
I
to make it up.
I hold grudges. I still don't talk to my middle school best friend because of an idea that her father put in her head.
Yeah.
So,
But I got very angry with UNO through a lot of the film, but didn't. I saw she was trouble, but I didn't see her as a villain. I think she was the cause of a lot of issues.
I
But
think she was intended to be the antagonist.
she was. Well,
I think she was.
I think mental illness was the antagonist.
Okay, but
But like, it wasn't.
I think mental illness was the villain, but Ueno was the antagonist. Because you can't have an intangible antagonist.
The antagonist changed throughout. I mean, I guess by definition, the antagonist is anyone who opposes the protagonist.
She opposed the protagonist,
And she did
consistently.
fairly consistently oppose Ishida.
And
So,
Shoko.
I suppose in that sense, I suppose she was an antagonist. But I don't know. I didn't like a lot of her actions, but I had a hard time also, like, kind of condemning her, But that's just me. We talked a lot about UNO. Let's talk about some of the other characters. Can we talk about Shoko and Yuzuru's mother, please? I did not like her for a lot of the film.
Shoko's mom?
Yes. She was kind of an unlikable bitch for a
Well,
while. And
I see.
It
I
ultimately
sympathize way more with her than with Ueno.
It boiled down to her being very overprotective. But, like, she was aggressive. And that's what made me most uncomfortable with her.
I agree. I was also, like, uncomfortable with her, but I 100% can see why. I absolutely understand why she got physical with Ishida's mother. You tell me that if your daughter was bullied relentlessly, costing you thousands of dollars, you wouldn't be in an uncontrollable fit of rage.
Yeah, but the thing is like, as an adult, you don't, as an adult and as a parent, you don't resort to violence. You don't resort to literally tearing out somebody's earring.
I think it highly depends on the situation.
I mean, yeah, I suppose you and I are going to have to just agree to disagree on this. I just think that, with this, the one thing is, later on, seeing some of her mom's actions as well, kind of like, I actually honestly thought that her mother was abusive because of when you see her when they're in high school.
Yeah.
Um,
And see her with Yuzura.
yeah, I guess she's had a tough time of raising the two of them, but it's just, I don't know, I find myself having a hard time forgiving her. I find myself having an easier time forgiving UNO because UNO's a child for all intents and purposes.
Oh, yeah.
She's a fucking teenager. Teenagers are dicks. And when I see Shoko's mom behaving the way she behaves, I'm like, you're a grown-ass and adult. You're supposed to be setting the example for your kid. And I think it's just why a lot of her behavior really bothered me throughout the film. But I think it's probably relevant to mention now, since we've touched on it a little bit. Shoko's deaf, but she has cochlear implants. And essentially, not only are they extremely expensive to replace, but they're also they're different than regular hearing aids. So a lot of the bullying that was going on in school was Ishida, taking her
Well, they would toss them around.
Yeah, they would take her hearing aids and they would like toss them around, and then he'd like throw them in the trash or throw them in the pond or step on them or whatever, like basically just causing her to lose / destroy a bunch of these very expensive devices. And where things finally came to a head right before the meeting between Ishida's mom and Shoko's mom was when he snuck up behind her in class and he went to grab her hearing aids from behind and pull them backwards. And it wound up injuring
her right ear.
To the point that she was bleeding. And then the next day she wasn't in school. And then the administration kind of comes in and they're like, the principal comes in and he's like, oh, well, it comes to my understanding that one of the students has been bullied. Does anybody know anything about this? And like everybody's quiet because middle school, And then finally, like, the teacher just goes, Ishida, we all know it was you. Take some fucking responsibility for what you did. And he's like, well, it wasn't just me. It was, UNO was picking on her too and talking shit behind her back and stuff. And then UNO's like, well, Kawhi was bullying her too and blah, blah, blah. And Kawhi's like, no, it wasn't me. It was you guys. How could you be so selfish and try to pull me under with you? Like, it was just you guys. You guys were the only ones. And it turned into this kind of a mess.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, Ishida wound up basically getting all the bullying directed towards him that he was initially leading the way on towards Shoko. And that's really what contributed really heavily to him developing the anxiety and the depression that he has later on. And despite all that happened to Shoko, what wound up actually getting her to leave the school wasn't all of that or anything. She was out for a day after she got injured. But it wasn't until Ishida basically couldn't handle the bullying that was being directed towards him. Because he's a hypocrite, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he'd never had to deal with people bullying him. He'd always been the...
He'd never been on that side of it.
Yeah.
So...
And I think he was already starting to kind of, like, come to terms with how nasty he had been. I think that was part of why he was having such a hard time handling it, is because it was kind of like, man, I used to do this to people. This is how they felt.
It seems like it.
It seemed like he was already kind of very early steps of it, but very much already starting to kind of see the impact he'd been having.
Yeah, and he, so he'd get thrown in the pond and get his books and notes and stuff like that thrown in the pond as well, and obviously ruining all of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, all sorts of stuff. And then Shoko was still in school, but was going out of her way to kind of avoid him. And
He caught her cleaning his desk.
because
Like, near his desk. He didn't, like, take the time to notice what she was doing, but she was, like, at his desk. And he was like, what are you doing at my desk?
Yeah.
What are you doing at my desk? Get away from my desk.
Meanwhile, what he didn't know is she was
Cleaning
the
nasty messages.
the nasty messages that everybody had written on his desk off of it for him.
Yeah.
Because she
So
was
that
trying.
she
She was
wouldn't
trying to make
see.
amends.
So that he wouldn't see, because
Yeah.
she knew he couldn't handle what was going on.
Yeah. So, you know, despite everything, she was still trying to be a good person towards him. And it finally came to a head where he basically saw her at his desk and kind of like lost it, started shouting at her, and eventually basically attacked her
Yeah.
in the classroom. And, you know, the two of them are rolling around, like, hitting each other, and he's, you know, she kind of is just like, you know, I'm doing my best, like, why, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when she left. You know, that's when she wound up leaving the school. So it's understandable how later on, when she sees him again, she's terrified of him.
Yeah. He's taking sign language courses
Yeah.
outside of school
Trying to remember
because
if that was how he...
yeah, she was at it was like a center for, like, disabled people. I could tell because there was railings on every wall, and
Yeah.
it was like a medical facility building.
I just find it weird that that was the first time he'd encountered her, if he's been going there for years.
I mean,
Trying to remember what led him to walking into that building on that day.
I think he had to go back inside for something.
Might have
I
been.
think he left the room, walked down the hall a little bit, and then realized he forgot something and turned around and she was walking down the hallway.
Might have been.
Something like that.
But regardless, he winds up bumping into her,
Mm-hmm.
and she, like, runs away from him. And then it wasn't that time. Was it? No, was it that time that she wound up kind of... No, he chased after her to apologize.
Yeah.
And
he signed to her that he wanted to be friends.
yeah.
And then he had another flashback,
flashback.
to every time, because every
Yeah.
time they had interacted in middle school, she had signed that she wanted to be friends with him.
Even
but he didn't
even
know,
after her
even
bullying.
during and after the bullying.
Yeah.
And he never understood what that meant until
Yeah.
literally that second, doing it to her, and he had like a mini, like, mental breakdown
Yeah.
crisis moment.
So,
Understandably.
Yeah. So they wound
But-
up going down to a bridge that was right next to the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and going with her to feed the koi fish,
Mm-hmm.
which she does every Tuesday. And then he goes to visit her again the following Tuesday, and Yuzuru is like, "Oh, I'm her boyfriend. You know, get out of here. Like,
Yeah.
she doesn't want to see you. You're not a friend." And he goes...
Calls him a rat to...
Yeah, she calls him a rat.
She calls him a rat to Shoko. Because Shoko asked who
It was.
it was.
She's like,
and
"Oh, it's just some ugly rat."
It was a rat. A nasty one. Which I thought was funny.
And he winds up befriending
Nagatsuka?
Nagatsuka.
Yeah, that's when he finally gets a friend in high school.
Yeah, he winds up befriending him because somebody's trying to steal his bike, Nagatsuka's bike, and he's like, help, somebody help. And he kind of walks over. He's like, hey, like, if you need to borrow a bike, you can borrow mine. And the guy's like, oh, thanks, man. And then steals his bike.
Yeah, naturally.
And then he's like, it was on Tuesday, too. It was the day he was supposed to go visit Shoko. And he is like, takes this as like a sign that maybe he's not supposed to go see her. And then
he sees a coupon on the ground
for bread to feed the
he
fish.
saw something on the ground and he started chasing it around like a deranged cat. Finally catches it and finds out it's a coupon for bread.
Yep. Takes that as a sign. So he goes back. He gets turned away by Yuzuru, and then as he's getting home, he bumps into Nagatsuka again, who's like, I found your bike. It was in a field. And he's like, oh, thanks. And then he's like, was it then that they hung out, or was it?
I think. I don't know. Actually, I
but
don't remember.
They
but
wound up
they ended
basically
up hanging out at like the arcade or something.
Yeah.
He invited him to the arcade then.
Yes.
And they hung out the next day.
And they wound up becoming friends, and like pretty close friends. And then he goes to visit Shoko again, and this time Nagatsuka kind of tags along. And when Yuzuru tries to like stop him at the door, Nagatsuka basically like, I don't want to say attacks her, but
tries to intimidate.
He like, they wind up wrestling
in a very bullying kind of way that really triggers the anxiety in Shoya.
Yeah.
He's like, please stop.
He's
please
like, stop,
please,
leave
please,
him
please,
alone.
Please don't.
And
please don't do that.
Shoko sees him at the door, and the two of them go to feed the koi again with the bread he brought. And Yuzuru and Nagatsuka are like spying on them through her camera from the balcony.
At this point, we still think it's a he.
Yeah. And obviously she can tell what they're saying because she understands sign, and they're signing back and forth to each other.
Yeah.
And they wind up, he goes to Ishida goes to give her back her notebook.
From middle school.
The one that was in, he found it when he got thrown into the pond one of the times, because he had thrown it into the pond.
Right.
And he goes to give it back to her, and then he's kind of like, wait, maybe
she starts to open it.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, don't.
He's like,
you don't want to read it.
Yeah, because it was a bunch of like bullying messages from him
read that right
and some
now.
of the other people.
Yeah.
And
he kind of panics.
Winds up accidentally knocking it out of her hand into the pond. She jumps in, and then he jumps in after her to make sure she's okay. And Yuzuru takes a picture of him jumping into the water, posts it on social media, and he gets suspended because you're not supposed to go swimming in that pond.
I think I don't quite understand like what suspension means in Japan, but it seems like he's not even supposed to leave his house.
Yeah, he was
it's like house arrest.
Yeah. So his mother, and actually jumping back a minute, when the flashback to 6th grade ends and it shows Ishida like home the next morning and like at breakfast, his mother being honestly like a really great mom, he's kind of like acting like everything's normal, and she's like, so why'd you try to kill yourself yesterday? And rather than like denying it or anything, he's like, oh, she already knows, like, and he's like, oh, just things have been tough lately. And she's like, I fucking knew it, you know, and she threatens to burn the money that he paid her. And she's like, you sold all your comics, and you blah, 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 and you know, and she's like super pissed at him. And she's like, if you what did she say? She's like, if you try that again, I'll burn all this money.
Mm-hmm. Or you have to promise that you won't
Oh,
try
yeah.
it again, or I'll burn the money.
Promise you won't try it again, or I'll burn the money. And he's like, no, like, don't do that. And she's like, promise, like, blah, blah, blah. So he's like, I promise. And she accidentally burns the money anyway. She sets the corner of it on fire, and then she drops it onto the griddle by mistake. And then they can't put it out, so it burns anyway. It was like 1.3 million yen or something like that.
It was a lot of money.
So it all burns, and he's like, oh, I'll pay it all back. And she's like, no, like, don't worry about it. She's like, who would want money that you were going to use to kill yourself anyway? Or something like that. Or not that
what
you were
was
gonna,
it?
She's like, she said something along the lines like, who would want money that was going to be like the reason you killed yourself, or like what you were going to use in order to kill yourself or something anyway. Something along those lines. Trying to like be like, oh, it's fine, like making excuses for why she didn't want the money anyway. Because again, she's a really super good parent. And so yeah, now jumping back forward again. So he goes to after he gets suspended, at the request of his mother, he goes to pick up his niece from the playground. And while he's there, he winds up finding Yuzuru like
She
sleeping.
was like sleeping in the play structure.
Yeah.
Which even once she says why, I am still confused
Seems
as
extreme.
to why. I'm still confused as to why.
Yeah. Because the reason she gives is a lie, because she's still pretending to be Shoko's boyfriend. It says that.
Yeah.
Says that she used Shoko's shampoo.
Yeah.
And they had a fight and she got kicked out, which clearly is not the truth. And they invite her back to Ishida's house to have dinner.
Yeah. She comes over for dinner, and
at
first didn't want to eat dinner.
Yeah.
And then Maria, in her being true to her cuteness, starts playing Airplane. Here comes the airplane.
Yep.
Open up.
So
standard, 2-year-old antics.
So
well,
naturally,
probably 3 or 4-year-old.
So naturally, she eats, and then
can't make the kids sad.
Yeah. And then they're heading home, and she starts to spend the night there, and then gets up in the middle of the night to leave, and Ishida tracks her down with an umbrella and shoes.
Yeah.
And is like, you have no shoes and it's raining. I'll walk you back or whatever.
Here's my old shoes from middle school.
Yeah, here's my old shoes from middle school. And they get back to Shoko's apartment building. And she kind of is like, oh, by the way, I'm Shoko's. And then she signs little sister. Mm-hmm. And he's like, looking at it, he's like, little sister? Oh my god! It's like, I'm sorry. And from that point forward, Yuzuru kind of starts to accept him as being like not a bad guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's trying so hard to be so nice, and
yeah, because she's like, oh, all I ever heard about him was the shitty things he did in middle school, and starts to more understand Shoko's desire to spend time with him, kind of.
Yeah. I don't know, really the only thing I really kind of gleaned from that is the reason that Yuzuru started to accept him was because despite Yuzuru never being anything but kind of cold and cruel to him, he insisted upon helping.
Yeah.
He insisted upon giving, and like providing anything he could, giving the umbrella from his hand and the shoes.
Yeah.
Like it didn't matter to him who at the time he was. It didn't matter to him that this person was who he thought to be
Shoko's boyfriend or whatever.
Boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, whatever. He was going to help.
Even as Yuzuru was basically shit-talking him on the wall, basically making the argument. Yuzuru's argument was like, bad people can't change. When you're a bad person, you're a bad person. And the fact that Ishida never denied... He never really denied doing the bad things that he had done.
Well, no.
And he never denied that he was a bad person. And he even was like, yeah, I don't deserve forgiveness. And I think that's a bit extreme, but, like, that was what Yuzuru kind of needed to hear, to be like, oh, like, you're not just doing this for yourself.
Yeah, you're not doing this for brownie points. You're doing this because you don't want to see someone suffer.
Yeah. And that's kind of what won her over.
Yeah.
And then, just as an aside, the fucking scene where Nagatsuka learns Yuzuru was actually a girl was hysterical.
It was very funny.
I laughed so hard.
Yeah.
Because it was, like, one of the few, like, really comedic moments. And, you know, you've got... you've got the four of them. You know, Shoko, Yuzuru, Nagatsuka, and Ishida kind of standing there. And Nagatsuka puts his arm over Shoko's shoulder to be like, oh, you know, blah, blah, blah. And Ishida's like, oh, by the way, that's Shoko's little sister. And then, like...
It pans... It cuts back to...
It cuts back to where they, like, to Yuzuru, where they were standing a second before. And you see Nagatsuka literally standing, like, they're on, like, the edge of, like, a...
They're on the corner of the street.
The corner of a sidewalk. And it shows him literally on the opposite corner of the street.
Yeah, he teleported across the street the instant he heard that Yuzuru was a girl.
And then he goes, I knew that. It was great. So then Shoko's not Shoko. Ishida's so fucking awkward because they meet up with Shoko and he's like, I've got a cell phone. You have a cell phone. Is anybody you want to talk to on your cell phone? It's just like, she basically tells him Sahara. She wants to know what happened to her.
Yeah.
So then it goes into this whole quest of him trying to track her down. And then he winds up having to ask Kawai if she knows, and she says the administration might know, and he goes on this whole quest, and Shoko tags along and winds up tracking her down. Coincidentally, at the
train
the
station.
train station at the destination, they're like, okay, we gotta go find the university now, or the college, the high school now. And Sahara just happens to see them on the escalator.
Yeah.
So that, yay, that works out.
This is where we see that she is a huge lesbian.
Yes.
She doesn't say or do anything necessarily, but you can just tell by the way she looks.
And she studied sign language the whole time too.
Yeah.
So her and Shoko end up having some girl talk. And Ishida's just kind of sitting there like, all right, I guess I'll go for a walk.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
And he winds up seeing Ueno
advertising a cat cafe.
Which is not what he initially thought it was.
Well,
when he saw her dressed as a cat on the sidewalk. So he goes there with Nagatsuka to try to make amends there as well. and she hides from him, and they get there, and it's literally a cafe where you're surrounded by cats.
Mm-hmm.
Is the whole thing it was. I think they both kind of had this face like they were expecting it to be something a lot more risque.
Interesting.
And they're like, well, I guess she's not here. Want to leave? Which, I mean, I wouldn't have, because cats, but
Yeah. Cannot relate.
We find out something's wrong with one of Shoko's implants. I forgot about that. Her right implant. There's something wrong with it. And she stops wearing her right hearing aid. So, clearly something went wrong with the actual implant, and it's no longer corresponding with the hearing aid.
Which just so happens to be the one that was bleeding when Shoya pulled it out in middle school.
Which
I
could
wonder
be
if
could be a coincidence.
I wonder
but
if there's a
we're
connection.
inclined to believe it's not.
Well,
And as an aside, I almost forgot to mention. So I mentioned Yuzuru had the camera that they were spying on the two of them with. Yuzuru is a photographer, and she seems to pick very strange subjects to photograph. It's almost always like dead animals and stuff.
yeah, dead bugs, dead animals.
And it's only later on that we find out why. It's so.
Well, we go through like a whole we kind of already touched on it, so I don't really think it's necessarily important to go through again, but where Shoya is going through and like making friends, making amends, like making connections here and there, and they have a scene at a amusement park and roller coaster scene, and then
The Ferris wheel where you see that Ueno basically says, "I don't like you, you don't like me." She says this in private, but actually, Yuzuru's camera comes in handy there because
Yuzuru had pressed record
on her
and
camera
then
and given it to Shoko.
asked Shoko to get, because they were going on the really tall Ferris wheel.
Yeah.
She's like, take some nice pictures,
She's like,
won't
take
you?
some nice pictures at the top, suspecting clearly that something was going to go down.
Yeah,
And
correctly.
was right,
Mhm.
because she sees in the video later, she shows to Ishida, she sees that Ueno basically was like, "I don't like you, you don't like me," and it got to the point where Ueno's like, where you can tell in the video that Shoko signs to Ueno like, I don't hate you."
Well, she says it out loud.
Oh, yes, she does. And Ueno responds to that by hitting her.
Yeah.
And then getting off the Ferris wheel. So yeah, amusement park, things like that.
Mhm.
What the fuck happens after that? So right after the roller coaster scene, it winds up coming out at school again that Ishida used
it was
to
at school.
be a bully.
Yeah. Because
And
Kawaii is extremely loud.
yeah, Kawaii basically
She's incapable of speaking quietly.
brings it up, and then it goes to Ishida basically saying, again, it wasn't just me, you too, and all this shit goes down, and Nagatsuka is like, "What do you mean you used to be a bully?" And then comes out who he used to bully. So then
And that scene kind of, to me, is why I feel like your assessment of Kawaii is incorrect. Because she's not trying to be a better person. She's trying to selfishly salvage her own image with no regards as to who she tears down in the process.
I suppose, I don't know.
That's why I disagree with your assessment of her. But
anyway,
I don't want to get into that.
They go to meet up on the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And Ueno's there. Kawaii's there. Sahara's there. Nagatsuka's there. Kawai's boyfriend is there.
Yeah.
Everybody's there. And they're kind of
Is
going back
this-
and forth.
Hang on, is this?
This is where I wrote down Ishida self-destructed.
Okay, so this is where this happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they meet up on the bridge and they're bickering back and forth, and Ueno's like, I don't need to be here. I don't need to apologize or whatever. And Kawai's like, we shouldn't have handled it the way we did. And then Ishida finally just had enough. And he basically calls everybody out. He's like...
Yeah, he calls out each individual person for their shortcomings, and including himself. He doesn't leave himself out.
Oh, yeah. And he basically says, Ueno, you're a bitch and a bully who never moved past what happened. He says, Kawai, you're just, all you give a shit about is yourself. You don't give a fuck about anybody else. All you care about is yourself and your image. And, go screw. And then when her boyfriend tries to jump in, he's like, somebody who says something like, a newcomer shouldn't have any...
An outsider shouldn't...
Yeah.
An outsider doesn't deserve a perspective. Or
Yeah.
an outsider doesn't deserve an input, or something like that.
Yeah. And then Nagatsuka, what is he? Oh, he says something like, you can't say anything about this, you don't even know. Or you're something, you barely know me.
Yeah, Nagatsuka tries to, like, defend... Ishida from himself, and he's like, no, dude, you've been a great friend to me. You're my best friend. I mean, like, you wouldn't...
Yeah, you're my best friend. And he's like,
you barely even know me.
Yeah, you keep calling me your best friend. You don't even know me.
Yeah.
And then he calls out Sahara for constantly running from her problems and being selfish in her own way.
Yeah.
And even says, too, like, oh, like, what are you going to do? You're going to go, you're going to run away from this, too, like everything else.
Yeah. Well, because she starts to turn away.
Yeah.
She starts to turn and walk away.
And the only people he doesn't really say shit bad about it are Shoko and Yuzuru.
Well, yeah, because they're the only ones who haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah. And
like, literally the two characters who have never done anything wrong.
And everybody basically leaves, and he basically tries to salvage... So no, actually, before that, that's when Yuzuru is worried about Shoko. That's when she goes to their grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Then, shortly after that, the grandmother passes away.
I think it was, like, a couple days later.
I think it was, like, the next day.
Something like that.
I think when Yuzuru woke up in bed next to her grandmother, I think she might have passed away in her sleep.
Mm.
That was the impression I got from it. She then goes to find Ishida, and he walks her to the funeral home, not realizing where they were going, and finds out what happened. So then he asks out Shoko shortly after that, to go on a date. So...
Well, I think something to touch on before that is, right before all that happens, Shia misunderstands Shoko saying, I love you.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the fuck that was.
It was during... Okay.
Oh, okay. It was... Yuena find him, tries to make amends. Suddenly he's not interested. Yueno's still a bully. Yuzuru and Ishida are texting buddies now. Shoko tries confessing to her love to Ishida. So that was way early.
Was it way
that
earlier?
That was so early. What the fuck?
I don't know. But, yeah, that happens. Oh, my God. Why does it keep doing that?
Okay, so that was actually, turns out... Apologies. That was right before the amusement park. Shoko and Ishida are hanging out. He finds it really weird because Shoko's trying to, like, just talk vocally to him a lot.
Yeah.
And he's like, slow down, slow down, slow down. She's like, oh, is my voice weird? And he's like, yeah. Wait, no, that's not what I meant. Like, he's like, I'm sorry. It's just, can we sign? It's easier. It's just...
It's got to be easier for you.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to understand. And
She gets all upset because the last thing she tries to speak again.
she tries to say,
I
I
love
love you.
you.
And he's like, the moon? Like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. And she panics and kind of like freaks out and leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And then she gets home and texts Yuzuru, who's like right next to her, that she tried to confess her feelings, and Yuzuru's like, fuck, man. And then Yuzuru sees Ishida later, and he's like, I can't tell what she was trying to say. Is something about the moon, and Yuzuru's trying not to laugh. She's like stifling a laugh, like, I don't know, maybe you should ask her out. Like,
Stupid.
so way later on, that was totally fucking, I cannot believe we missed that.
It could have also just been like 2 days before. Who knows? There's a lot that happens in this movie.
Yeah, well, because it was, again, the roller coaster scene. The whole roller coaster thing happens after that.
Well, yeah,
then
I
the
know.
self-destruction of the friendship and all that shit. Ishida asks Shoko out. He kind of further unravels.
I don't actually remember this.
Yeah, he sort of like, you see him clinging to the last remnants of the friend group.
Right. It wasn't so much an unraveling. It was an attempt to stop an unraveling. In a
but
sense.
in so doing, kind of unraveling.
Well, yeah.
So he attempts to save the friend group by just spending time with Yuzuru and Ishida and Shoko.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's like Shoko kind of would just like to spend time with him.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually he winds up going over to their apartment to help bake a birthday cake for her mother.
Not his idea.
Not his idea.
He did not even want to. He was like, "Are you sure this is okay?
He thought it
Is she going to kill me?"
Yeah. And then didn't Yuzuru say, like, she might? Or
she
something?
might. I don't know. Then the mom gets home and he's like panicking and
she's
Yuzuru
upset.
and
she's like, why is he here?
yeah, and then Yuzuru and Shoko both defend him, and it's more like this is a celebration.
This is a celebration.
Let's set our differences apart. And he's here to celebrate you with you.
Yeah. So then everything seems good between all of them. They then go to see fireworks, and this is great. So they're all four of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's
the mom, the two daughters, and him.
Yes, and Yuzuru and the mother leave temporarily to go get something to eat.
Yes.
And it's just him and Shoko, and they're watching the fireworks, and I'm trying to remember, she says...
She's gonna go back to the...
Before that, she says something to him. Like, thank you for everything you've done, or something. Basically, as we come to soon find out, she's saying goodbye.
Yeah.
She then says she's tired, and she's gonna go back to go to bed. And he's like, all right, I'll see you tomorrow or whatever. And then Yuzuru and the mother come back, and they're like, Yuzuru's like, oh, hey, can you run and grab my camera at the apartment really quick and bring it back to me? Make sure it's charged. So he heads back to the apartment, and he's like, oh, is Shoko here? All the lights are off. Or it doesn't seem like anybody's home. And he's like looking around for her, and then he sees her kind of like standing on the balcony, and he's like, oh, there she is, like, hey. And then she starts to climb up on top of the balcony.
Yeah, up on the railing.
And he's like, no, wait, because he's like, been here, been there, done that. And he's trying to shout to her, but she doesn't have her implant in, so she can't hear him. And he runs, and he trips over the table, and she jumps, and he manages to get to the edge of the balcony just in time to catch her hand. And he starts to pull her up. and as soon as she gets up, he loses his balance and falls off the balcony. And he lands,
in a river?
10 stories below or something like that?
He lands in water, though.
Yeah, he lands, it looks like it's the river that she's always feeding the koi.
Maybe. But, I mean, you fall into water from that high up, it's basically like cement.
Yeah, so he lands in the river on his back and passes out. And then you find out he's in the hospital. He didn't die on impact, but he's in a coma.
Mm-hmm.
And Ishida's mom shows up at the hospital while Shoko's mom and Shoko is there. No, Shoko's not there. It was Yuzuru is there with her mom. Shoko wasn't around.
Yeah.
And also it turns out when he grabbed her arm, she fractured her wrist or something.
Something like that.
But, so she's in...
Understandably,
yeah, one of her arms is in a cast.
Probably dislocated her shoulder.
So...
I mean, think about, like...
Yeah, so... Ishida's mom still doesn't know exactly what happened. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. He must have caused problems for you again. You know...
Yeah.
He tried to do this once before, blah, blah, blah. And Shoko's mom's like, no, it was my daughter. He saved her life, and he fell, and now he's in a coma because of my daughter.
Yeah.
And tries to, like, and basically bows, like, on the floor, and Ishida's mom's like, stand up, please stand up, this is not...
Yeah.
And then she's like, it was my daughter, it wasn't your son's fault, you know, he did the right thing. And, like, the three of them all sort of, like, melt down a little bit. And so then Ueno shows up at the hospital. So it turns out Shoko was there with her mom and sister. She was on one of the balconies, just kind of looking out with her cast on, because she was getting her arm treated. This was, like, right after it happened, because again, Ishida's mom had just found out then what happened. So this must have been right after. So she was there getting her arm treated. She was on one of the balconies. Ueno shows up and finds Shoko there, blames her, and eventually actually, like, starts fighting with her, like, physically again. And Ishida's mom shows up to break up the fight. Ueno basically blames Shoko for everything and says it'd have been better if she never was around, and it should have been her, basically. Later on, we see Yuzuru and her mom at the house, and that's when you find out why she was photographing all the dead things. Basically,
she's photographing dead things to show Shoko what death looks like.
Yeah.
And to try to show her that this is what will happen.
Yeah.
This is what you will be like. And we don't want that. You shouldn't want that. Your life matters.
Yeah, she's...
You have so much of it left. Please stay with us.
Yeah, because Yuzuru was aware that Shoko had been suicidal for a long time, and...
Well, I'm sure she had told her.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're very close.
Yeah.
She would have communicated this.
She knew about this secret Shoko had for a long time, before the audience and Ishida ever became aware of it. And she like you said, she's photographing all the dead things, and she's literally, the apartment is riddled with photographs. They're hung all over the walls, basically plastering the walls. And she starts to take all the photos down, even though she, like, you know, her mom had submitted them to, like, photo contests and got them in magazines and stuff. So she starts to take them all down, and essentially Shoko then decides that she needs to rebuild the friend group that she feels like she was responsible for destroying. She's like, I need to do this basically in his memory because he might die.
Yeah.
She was fully convinced he was not going to survive. Shoko keeps showing up at the hospital.
Yeah.
And Ueno keeps leaving the hospital, like right at the same time. Well,
And
not right at the same time. Shoko's out there for hours, you get the impression.
Well, also, at one point, Shoko tries to come visit.
Yes.
And
yes.
Ueno chases her away, more or less. Shoos her away, says, don't bother, or whatever, something. I can't remember exactly, like, what reasoning she gave, but it was nasty and mean and uncalled for.
And I kind of mentioned that, like, Ueno doesn't have any right to be so angry with Shoko.
No.
She has no right because she betrayed him, Ishida also. She was kind of just as much to blame.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but in her eyes, it was all Shoko's fault for showing up.
None of this would have
that time.
happened if she had never shown up in 6th grade. And I'm a angsty teenager.
Yeah.
I mean, she successfully gets everyone together eventually.
Yeah.
Ueno's the hardest to convince because, like you said, she's standing out in front of the hospital waiting for her to leave every day.
Every day. Because Ueno's visiting him every day.
Yeah.
You know, you can kind of... I get the impression that Ueno has feelings for him.
Probably.
And that's probably also a big part of why she's so bitter with Shoko. Gotta love that good old-fashioned romantic rivalry.
Yeah.
So... she wakes up one night from a nightmare, dreaming that he's dead, basically. And she goes down to the bridge and kind of just sits there curled up, and I think she's crying.
She has a full-on breakdown.
Yeah.
She's sobbing
and then
shrieking.
He wakes up at basically the same time as her from his coma, having a similar dream.
Like a weirdly parallel dream.
Yeah. And breaks out of the hospital, and he goes down to the bridge as well and finds her there. And when she first sees him, she thinks he's not real.
Yeah, she thinks she's seeing things.
And
she thinks she's dreaming or seeing things or something.
She reaches out and like touches him and then like jumps backwards. It was cute.
It was a cute moment, yeah.
So he's awake now and everything's good, and Shoko's basically built the friendship group back up again. Mm-hmm. Everybody's super thrilled to see him okay, especially Nagatsuka.
Yeah.
And Kawaii and her boyfriend get this, what is it, like a well wishes?
Oh, the Thousand Cranes. It's a traditional Japanese.
Okay.
Well, there's some sort of festival going on when he's like in the hospital / waking up. It's like the school festival.
Yeah.
But also the Thousand Cranes is like a traditional. It's like a traditional like well wish.
Yeah, I was gonna say yeah. So she was ashamed of it because they couldn't get 1,000 names.
Yeah, because it's supposed to be like from everybody. It's supposed to be like a communal gift.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get 1,000 because they couldn't get enough people together.
So
to honor his name because
he had kind of a bad rep.
She had officially ruined his reputation in high school.
Yeah.
By calling him out as a bully.
Yeah. So he's still super flattered that they got as many as they did. He's like, really, this many? Like, holy shit. And you kind of, he winds up going to, was it his own school festival?
He got out of the hospital, he got officially dismissed released from the hospital. And then Shoko talked him into going to school for the festival.
Yeah.
She basically dragged him by his wrist to go back to school.
Yeah.
she she made him direct her to his classroom, and then called Nagatsuka and Kawai out of the room.
Yeah. And
as they were standing there, he chickened out, ran to the bathroom. Nagatsuka chased after him. And, like, they had a little, like, bro moment, which was sweet.
And
then the group gathered, and UNO and Sahara were there.
Yeah.
And they had a moment. That's when UNO signs Baka at Shoko. And then they go outside, and through conversation, he's, like, kind of talked down a little bit from his anxiety. And that's one of the few panning shots we get, because up to this point, all of the school still had all the blue X's over their faces.
Yep.
And I can't remember who it was he was talking to. I think it was Sahara. They were talking, and she said something to, like, that kind of, like, made her have this realization, and it pans away, and you see all the blue X's fall to the ground.
Yeah. And actually, before that, I'm trying to figure out exactly where this falls in the events. It seems to be, like, right before he goes to the school. But Yuzuru tells him that she started school, which, good for her. And she shows him two things. She shows him a magazine with some of her photos in it, and he's like, wow, that's amazing. And then she shows him a test that she took, and it was like a complete fail. He goes, well, that's amazing also. And she's like, can you help me study? So that was
I don't know when that falls, but that was cute. Yeah,
that was a cute moment between the two of them. I think it was right after he runs into Shoko on the bridge. But
yeah, all the X's fall.
Yep.
And that's
the end.
The end.
That's how the film ends. And what did you think about the ending?
I mean, I thought it was a fairly satisfying ending. I mean, the only character that didn't get any redemption in my eyes at all was Ueno. Like, everybody else had kind of, like, made peace with themselves, made peace with each other. Ueno tried. Like I said, I felt like it was too little too late, but yeah. For her, that's about as much redemption as you could hope for, kind of.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a good, like, growing up, like, series of events that led to the end of the movie.
It was a coming of age.
Yeah.
Now, I will say there's one thing I was disappointed in.
Okay.
I thought the ending was great.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that disappointed me is I wished it had ended on Shoko properly confessing her feelings to him in a way he understood.
Well,
because I was a little sad that we never got to see him respond to her on that.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of a bummer.
I thought it was... I don't think that would have been necessary. I think that the feelings were very well understood.
Not necessary, but I think it...
I mean, especially for the two of them.
It would have added, like, an extra... I think it would have added an extra level of satisfaction to the ending, in my opinion. I think being able to see that, being able to see him finally understand what she meant. She wasn't talking about the fucking moon. And, you know, be able to respond, you know, properly to that. I think that was the one thing that I wished had been in it, and I was actually kind of disappointed that they didn't go back to that.
I don't know, I kind of...
Because she confesses really relatively early in the film, like halfway through. And then, like, all this other shit happens. And then she tries to die and all this stuff. And then, like, even on their date and everything, she still doesn't confess again. And then the film ends without her doing so. And I was like, oh, that's a bummer.
I don't know, I didn't really...
There was the one thing I didn't like about it.
I didn't think it lost anything for that personally.
Yeah, that's fair. I just that if I could change one thing, about the film, it would be that I would add in her confessing again properly. But other than that, I mean, what are your final impressions? If you had to just wrap things up, summarize how you felt, what would you say?
I think it was a very good it was a very good representation of how children will act.
Yeah.
How kids will unknowingly self-destruct if not given the proper guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is a really good story about how a bunch of kids who self-destructed really early kind of figured out where they went wrong and fixed it.
Yeah.
And with how human these characters are written,
yeah,
I think that if you are in this age group and you have self-destructed a little bit, it is a really good, like, source of, like, hope and maybe a good couple nuggets of advice in there as well.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I think that writing this probably took a lot of the writers back to some of their previous mistakes. It seems like with how personally and how accurately these characters are represented in this, they were based on some personal experiences.
Probably.
And I think that adds a lot.
Yeah. Who would you recommend this film to?
Anybody who likes the genre, really. Literally, it's a very good movie. There's not much to dislike about it. If you are sensitive to topics in it, suicidal thoughts, severe anxiety, being represented very accurately, maybe skip this one. Stick to reviews of it, clips of it, synopses of it. Maybe don't watch it because it gets pretty intense. But otherwise, if you like character dramas, watch it. Do it. It's 2 hours. You'll like it.
Yeah.
Like,
I basically just said, this movie was a ride.
Yeah.
The art and the writing came together in an extremely moving way, and it tackled a lot of very intense subjects in a very artful way. The whole thing was masterfully written and animated. The characters were outstanding, and the tone was genuine and sincere.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as who should watch this, everyone should watch this film. Everybody should watch this film. It's 2 hours, and it's worth it. And it's important. I think it's important. I think it talks about a lot of things that really people who don't struggle with mental illness need to understand this.
Yeah.
And people who do, I think it could add a teaching moment.
I think it could add some context for why the people around them are doing what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think the one thing is as you said, if seeing suicide attempts on screen could negatively affect your well-being, then that's for you to decide whether it's appropriate for you to watch this. But I think other than that, honestly, everyone should see this movie.
Yeah.
It's, outstanding is something of an understatement. I don't want to, I know I'm talking it up a lot, but, like, it's fucking damn good. It's worth watching. It's worth the time. And even people who aren't necessarily fans of the genre, I think this is an important movie to watch. So, that sums it up. If you manage to get through this, then in the amount of time that you've been listening to this, you could have basically had the film finished.
Yeah.
So go watch it. Seriously. It's really fantastic. Uh, Next week, we will actually be reviewing, Patrick and myself will be reviewing my first Studio Ghibli film. So, uh, people can hopefully finally stop telling me that I don't know shit about anime because I've never seen Ghibli before. But we will be reviewing Kiki's Delivery Service. And if you want to watch that, you can find it. If you're in the United States or Canada, you can find it on HBO Max, I believe. And if you're basically anywhere else in the world or you use a VPN, you should be able to find it on Netflix. So I think that's it. What do you have any final parting words?
No,
No,
not really.
nothing.
I mean, we just talked for 2 hours. I'm kind of talked out.
Fair enough. So that's it, guys, and we will see you next week with a new episode. And until then, I guess keep watching that Weeb shit.